our next guest turns out with the most bearish forecast for Q4 and full-year GDP for the Philippines in 2025 in our latest Business World poll. PNB is tipping for Q4 to come in at 3.2% for 4Q and 4.5% for the full year. The median in the same Business World poll for 4Q GDP is 4.2%, while full year is at 4.8%. Well, with us now for more is Alvin Joseph Arogo, the FVP and Chief Economist at PNB. Good to have you with us, Alvin. Welcome to the program.
Good morning, Kathy, and thank you for having me.
All right, so you've seen that chart. You're at the left side of the screen. That's why we sought you out. Were you surprised that you're the most bearish of them all?
A bit. Maybe let me preface by saying that that forecast was made immediately after the third quarter GDP numbers were out early November. And as we all know now, we are at the onset of a domestic shock because of the corruption probe. And so it's basically a big guessing game for everyone. I turned out to be the most, I would say slightly more bearish than the next one, but yeah, compared to the overall average below. But as you can see from the chart that you're showing, there's a big variation in the forecast.
I mean, I'm looking at the variation from your previous. You came all the way from 5.4%. So what specific data points convinced you to cut this much so soon?
Well, as you know, the corruption probe happened maybe middle of third quarter of last year. I was expecting that the full brunt will happen fourth quarter in terms of the impact. But in the third quarter data, we saw that public construction alone dropped by 26%. In addition to that, we saw the spillover effects on private investments as well as household consumption. So those two were, to me at least, convinced me of those numbers that I produced.
And specifically that 4Q came in at 3.2% according to your own estimates. And I had to look this up, Alvin. I mean, that was like the third quarter of 2011 when year-on-year growth slowed because of weak exports. There was also bad weather during that time and soft government spending. So how similar or different do you think the conditions are today, apart from the fact that we're 15 years older now?
Well, I had to go back a bit farther than that. So if you recall, this corruption probe is a bit similar to when President Aquino Jr. at that time had his own anti-corruption agenda. And during that period, public construction on a year-on-year basis was depressed for 5 quarters. So I really had to dig deeper in terms of what parallels I can use. But like I said, I'm not wishing for the country to grow at 3.2%, but using the recent performance as well as the historical impact of a corruption probe, those were my two bases for those numbers.
Yeah, well, data don't lie when the numbers are right. When the numbers come out in 24 hours, beyond the headline GDP number, which line item are you going to be checking first to validate your call? Is it going to be public construction, private construction, or household consumption, or even maybe the net trade line?
Well, you got it spot on. It's like you read my mind. I would definitely start with public construction to see if the drop is as big or even worse than the third quarter. Followed by that, I would look into the second round effects, particularly overall capital formation. So you have business spending, durable equipment investments, and then finally, household consumption, particularly on the discretionary items. Finally, as you probably are very familiar, in 2025, the country benefited from front-loading, meaning a lot of us were expecting that exports would drop because of the US tariffs. Instead, to front-load the impact into 2026, a lot of exporters actually did very well last year. So I'm going to look whether that has tapered off in the fourth quarter.
All right, so how much pressure then does this put on the BSP to ease more versus your view that really the bottleneck right now is on the fiscal execution and also of the governance side rather than policy rate? Because right now it's the BSP hard carrying an economy that slowed so much so soon.
Well, rate cuts can only do so much. Rate cuts cannot improve confidence. So having said that, I think the BSP will cut one more time, February, and then after that, do a long hold. So in addition to the complications of what the BSP rate cut would do to the peso, if you take into consideration the rate differential, especially with the Fed, I think the BSP has also said that, yes, rate cuts are important, but the problem that we have right now is confidence, public trust. And like I mentioned in the beginning, the rate cuts can only do so much. So they cannot do a lot of the heavy lifting if the problem is something different.
Right, so we go to the fiscal side now. So what would you like to see from the 2026 budget rollout and project pipeline that would make you comfortable of lifting your 4% 2026 forecast closer to where you used to be before the probe hit?
Well, I wouldn't go into details, but I think the budget in 2025, it faced a lot of criticisms, particularly the allocations. So if those things were resolved, then I think that would help. But ultimately, budget is one thing, execution is another. And so there's still a lot of ways to go convincing the public that the money, the taxpayers' money, is going into the right places. So I think it's harder to give an exact medicine for that, no? But we all know what we need to happen, which is for public sentiment to improve, to regain trust. No? But how exactly that would happen, only time would tell.
Exactly to your point, I want to see a silver lining here because there's a sudden sharp rebound, sort of a V-shaped recovery that you're expecting for 2027 because you're forecasting 6.5%. How do you connect the dots then if there's a lot of uncertainty with confidence?
Well, the romantic view about it is time would heal wounds. So my view is that if I look into, again, what happened during President Aquino's time, the depressed public construction lasted for about 5 quarters. And then the sentiment changed from, aggressive or very strict fight against corruption to, again, focusing growth. That's why, if you remember, after the President Aquino's corruption probe, there was the disbursement acceleration program, which led to more or faster government spending. So my view is that the impact of the corruption probe will be harsh, but would be limited to 2026. But given the pain that the economy will experience this year, then the sentiment will turn into let's prioritize growth, accept some leakage, unfortunately, and then the economy will rebound strongly in 2027. But mind you, that's not a structural change. That's only a coming from depressed growth and then rebounding because of that change in the sentiment from focusing on fighting corruption to focusing on growth.
Lots to learn from history. Well, thank you so much for putting that into perspective. Alvin Arogo of PNB.